what are the biggest challenges that we face in financial crime and KYC? Why is it harder than the simple picture that I showed earlier? Marjoleine.
Well, I fully echo what you're saying because it's a fragmented area we work in. And of course, looking from the challenge from a client perspective, because of course we also have challenges from internal perspective, but the client is the one, of course, who we all do it for. And to be very honest, KYC is very time consuming and not really adding value for clients. So they mainly see it as something which needs to be done instead of, yay, we're going to do KYC. But it is fragmented. We as ING are a global bank, so the majority of our clients also operate in multiple countries, and then you see indeed that different regulations have different requirements. So for clients operating in more countries, that's really a challenge currently. So that's on the one side, and you just mentioned like AMLR. I think with AMLR, it harmonizes the regulatory requirements in Europe. So I hope that there will be a bit of the benefit out of it. Next to that, what our clients always complain of or ask us to do better is reuse their data. KYC is a black box. That's what you hear from our clients. But also the requirements we ask, mainly coming back to the fragmented area we operate in.
Thank you, Marjoleine. And maybe, Ibrahim, is there anything from your perspective in the Rabo context that you want to add to the complexities that we face in this space?
Yeah, with regards to KYC, previously it was like onboarding for the KYC and the CDDs, but now with all the AI stuff, with all the agentic AI and all the automation that we are facing, it should be like a more or less a real-time KYC, and also that will be taking care about your access, about your passive identification. So all this is like inefficiencies that we really need to be up to date and how we can make all our financial sectors and the banking industry to be safe.
And I think a question for me on that is do we really need AI for that, or is that just is there automation? Is it? I mean, is there a level of automation plus then AI?
It's the first, so it's like a more automation, and only so about automation is also we are including AI in it. So that's both of them.
Cool. And Jurg, maybe coming to you to speak about some of these challenges that we're addressing. How are you overcoming that in the market? How are you helping banks to sort of through automation and pooling of data and bringing things together actually help solve the challenges that we have in the compliance space?
Yeah, first of all, we had a marketing lead and they wanted us to become a love brand. So I said, no, that's not happening because we're a commodity, or we should be. And especially in Germany with a lot of on-top restrictions to other countries. We have this live video call, takes 4 or 5 minutes, and definitely not what the customer needs to experience. But at the end, it's the best converting solution we have. It's next to all the automated solution. It's the least fraudulent onboardings you see. So it's always this balance between making your client happy and saving your bank from somebody entering the system in this very first moment of your user touch point. And that should be a risk decision. And in some cases, you might want to go for an automated solution. In the next situation, you want to go for the full video thing because there's a guy asking for 100,000 for a mortgage. But with the upcoming changes from next year, I would just warn you to just go for the cheapest and compliant way to onboard and to rely too much on AI unless you have your data structured and ready. What I see, we have 24 million stored identities, and with a couple of 100 million data points, super structured, and then it's easy to just do some machine learning, look for behaviors. You see that from a certain country something happened in the last couple of days, and you can warn the banks. We can pool it somehow because we work with 90% of the private banks in Germany. But yeah, you need to look for a balance between being super easy to onboard and secure yourself from some gangsters.
Gangsters. On that point of gangsters, and I don't know if this is the right point, but you've just spoken a lot about some of the concerns or some of the challenges that we see with AI and some of the opportunities that we have with AI. I suppose, what are the use cases that you think, if you have to think about this sort of cross-section of where we stand from a KYC and onboarding perspective, what are some of the use cases that you think are really geared for AI usage versus what are some of those use cases which maybe is a little bit more on the automation side?
Yeah, so within risk and compliance, when we started talking about AI, Gen AI 3 years back, we were looking at, I think, more elemental things like, it'll help a compliance officer in his or her investigation by pulling data from various sources, or creating a first draft of a SAR report. I remember at that time reading that in UK, if you aggregate the time spent in creation of SAR reports by all banks, it was 1 million man-hours a year. I couldn't believe it. And I felt, look, even if we can use AI to some extent to scrape through different systems that a compliance officer would need to dive into to generate the information required for a SAR report, it can still be a huge efficiency gain. Now, moving forward, I think we are at the point where we are deploying agentic solutions around more complex use cases. So you just mentioned, Ibrahim, about perpetual KYC rather than doing point-in-time KYC. So you can use an agentic solution to flag events which necessitates a KYC, and then other agents who will get the required information from internal sources as well as external sources, and then do the KYC. So that's clearly one of the use cases that different banks are looking at. Another example which comes to mind, and this is real for me because at one point in time, not so long ago, I was in another organization and we were talking to create a consortium of consulting companies and banks to do horizon scanning of regulations, and then doing an impact analysis and sending feedback to the bank on how that impact analysis changes their policies, and then moving forward their processes and systems. It didn't fly. However, now that is a clear case where agentic AI can help. So you can call it like a horizon scanning system and automatic policy update, right? So again, I'm not describing the whole process, but I guess all of you are knowledgeable enough to understand how this may help. And then, of course, transaction monitoring, reducing the number of false positives. So those of you who are from the compliance and fin crime areas of banks, you know what a nuisance false positives are. And you deploy deterministic rules, and you get drowned with false positives. But again, using agentic AI, you can reduce the number of false positives. And if you have some genuine, of course, you need a human in the loop, depending on what kind of triggers you get. But then you can use other agents which can do the investigation, even block accounts, and create a SAR report. So again, these are just 3 examples, but there are numerous examples where compliance and risk areas can deploy AI.
Thank you very much for that. I think my scary part is always we can reduce the number of false positives, but we can also reduce the number of true positives, which is the part that I suppose scares me a little bit if we start relying on AI too much. That should be the human in the loop, but they don't look at the, yeah. I suppose from your perspective, maybe, Ibrahim, how do you, are there things that you guys are already looking at in Rabo? Are there things that you can share that you think is exciting in the space in terms of use cases that we can, use AI for in compliance?
Well, not talking just about Rabo, but all for the industry as a whole, as a financial industry. As mentioned also that if it's like hackers and other stuff that they are using AI to penetrate to the systems. So if it's only human that will do it, human loop should be part of it, but how we can use these tools, it's like an added value. It's rather than just to be a scary tooling that will be used and it might have some kind of consequences, but it will help you as a human, that it will increase the value, it will reduce also the time. It will give you much more timing to, rather than to go to, for example, the AI drift. So if you train it in 2023 and then you need to get a good result 2026, that won't help you. But how can you make it much more well-trained and continuously trained? And you can see also the behavior of the customers. You could also check what is up to date with all the geopolitical issues. You could also see what any kind of, with the changes that are happening, the pandemic issues, any sort of things that need to be built in. It's not that easy for humans to cover all this stuff and have it in a real-time detection. So that's why we are using it as a pro-human, not just an agentic AI tooling, but this will really help to reduce the timing to detect if there is any anomalies or abnormalities within the banking industry.
Thank you for that. Did you want to add, Marjoleine?
Yes, because indeed, in ING 2-3 years ago, we started working with Gen AI, maybe a bit before that. But what we're currently doing and what we've been doing the last 2-3 years is mainly using AI or Gen AI for the standard, more boring stuff, which KYC analysts are currently doing, because getting your data gathering, document collection, things like that, that's really not the most favorite part of the majority of our analysts. So this is what we're currently doing. But what you also see happening throughout, I'm responsible for EMEA, so what I see happening in EMEA is that people themselves in the countries are trying to work with AI and indeed start building agents to check policies, for example, which is really very nice to see that the adoption is growing and that people are like, okay, you really can do a lot with it. On global level, we're currently looking at, we just talked about it, risk assessments. So we're really moving now from Gen AI, and of course there's way more to discover there and to win there, but it's mainly parts of the process. It's not the end-to-end process yet, but parts of the process. But we're looking with agentic AI now in doing risk assessments, so really supporting decision-making. And of course, human in the loop should be there, because we're not there yet to rely fully on AI, and you need to have a control framework, etc. But we are moving that direction, and still we're in a learning journey. Let's not sugarcoat it over here. We are learning together with our stakeholders, together with regulators, just to see, okay, what is possible? What can we do? And you see quite some promising results out of it. So that's nice.
One of the exciting things you've just spoken about is how you have people in the regions who get excited about starting to use AI, and whether that is agentic AI or whether that is different parts of AI, they're starting to get excited. Now, I think we're all pretty well aware of the fact that recently in various social media platforms, there's been some controversial statements around especially this compliance space, workforce in the compliance space, and how we intend to decrease the number of employees we have in this space as a result of being able to deploy efficient AI. Now, I think one of the things that kind of bugs me is how do we make sure, because we're not there, right? We can't just reduce the workforce at this stage. We're in the process of getting to a stage where we can actually use AI. How do we make sure that people remain motivated, remain relevant, actually continue to do what they need to do, and then also help us move forward in our journey?
And this really makes my heart tick, because we're talking about people. Currently, the banking environment is based on manual work. For KYC, I'm working with thousands of people throughout the globe doing this work, and we're all talking about, okay, AI. So that's also a bit what I miss here today, that we're talking on. How are we going to move into execution? The lady who was sitting over there next, just for me, touched the point, because it is like, how do you enable them and motivate them to indeed start working with AI? We can say, for example, in some presentation, we said, yeah, we need other people. We need other people. We have a whole workforce. We, as ING, have thousands of people working here, and we have some obligation to them as well. So I'm really in favor of training these people. That's also what we do within ING. We have a program, Carly mentioned it this morning, AI for all. So we're training our people to see, okay, what is AI and what can you do with it? And yes, it's going to change your world. It's going to change the world. But it is more like your job is going to change, instead of saying, hey, thanks for all your effort the last 20, 30, 40 years within ING. We go along with somebody else. And that's really what I think that we can also, as a community over here, become better in, because we're sitting here and maybe we are all like, okay, this needs to happen. We need to start using AI, but we have hundreds or thousands of people, behind us, and I think we need to take care of them and help them to get along the way.
Any ideas from anybody in the panel on how we can help our people to remain relevant? How do we get them, invested in this AI journey?
Yeah, I can add also to Marjoleine is the psychological safety. So if you are, as ING or Rabobank, have thousands of people there, but if you use AI, then it will replace you. It's not going to replace you if you don't take care of adding value to yourself. If you're like, you'll be kept as a dinosaur that will not be updated with all what's happening in the current situation, that you're doing that for yourself. So why not you train yourself? You get to know what are those toolings for. What is the added value for it? Is it like the usage of AI as a responsible usage rather than just use AI as a hype or as a new thing that I need to know about AI? AI is not a game. It's really, you need to use it in a very responsible way, in a safety manner, unbiased. So all these things, also for the confidentiality of the data, with all the, that need to be also aligned with all the GDPR, the DORA, the PCPS 239, and all those acts that really make the usage of AI very responsible. So with all this knowledge that you will gain from this AI, you will see that a bunch of your time was losing time of doing things that really can be done in minutes. So you'll be having a bunch of time to accelerate more. You'll be having an added value. You could also be promoted in your work rather than to stay and waiting for the days that they will say, sorry, you need to go out and we will replace you with another agent. But why not you be the human agent that people will really catch your hands and will say, we really need you. You are an asset within this bank and within this financial sector. You need to stay with us. But how you need to respect also for yourself to be a better version of yourself rather than to continue with all this expertise. Nowadays, the 1 year of expertise sometimes goes to hours of expertise within the agentic AI or the within the AI world.
And I think we're all challenged to continuously learn. Dirit, you've got a comment that you want to make as well?
I just wanted to add, so if anyone expresses this concern, I tell them a little story, which I read in The Telegraph, is one of the newspapers back in UK. A story which they carried some 120 odd years back. And it was all about, so there was a whole industry of horse-drawn carriages, right? People making carriages, people grooming horses, people who provided fodder for the horses to eat and so on. And this whole article was about how there will be an absolute bloodbath in the job market because something is coming called automobile, which can run on fuel and which wouldn't need the horse, it wouldn't need a coachman, it wouldn't need the coachman's assistant, and wouldn't need a whole lot of things. And then what happened once automobiles came up? The number of jobs created multiplied 10 times. So I think my forecast is, of course, it won't be the same job. Some jobs will go. But new jobs will be created. And of course, as Ibrahim correctly said, it's a matter of retooling, being positive and adopting this as an opportunity rather than as a threat.
There'll always be jobs. I can't see them disappearing entirely. I hope not. We spoke a little bit, Ibrahim, I think you mentioned some of the regulations that we have in the space. We've spoken about regulations all during the day as well. I think Miles said something around regulation creating an opportunity. Not necessarily, stopping us from innovation. So how do we see regulation in this space? Is regulation sort of helping us to use AI in a safe, responsible, sustainable way, or is regulation slowing down our innovation? What are we thinking?
Regulations, actually, they really help us and support us. If it is just opened that everyone can use whatever he wants, then it will be, I think, a part of, even the normal people start to be criminals. So that's why there is regulations, and regulations also part of, they are not very well trained and they know what actually it is. It is from time to time, it's evolving. They change also some kind of articles. If they say it is less mature, then they say, yeah, we need to do some kind of changes to that articles, and we learn from you guys, you learn from us. It's a part of a cooperative, because we are talking, for example, for certain regulations from 2023 or 2024, some also 2025. So it is still a newly advanced regulations. PCPS, for example, is much more I'll not say outdated, but somehow matured enough. ISO standards, now we're talking about 42001. Previously we used to talk about 27001 for the security issues, and now we are talking about AI governance. So the more standards they are, the more regulators they are, not to be part of retraining all of our efforts. They need to be part of us to support, and we really need to compete, because I don't know how to say it, but while we talk about any LLMs, we don't see any European LLMs, for example. So that's because of the heavily regulations that's happening. But even if the regulators will say, yeah, you have some kind of space for your innovation, and we will be supporting you and helping you, this will really make it much more compliant and easier for the banking industry and all other industry how to compete and also to evolve within such an industry.
It's an interesting point, and it actually brings me back to what you said earlier, because I suppose when there's regulation within sort of our contained space, it helps us because it standardizes things. If we think about AMLA and AMRA, it's going to help us do things a little bit better. It's going to help us build something sustainable. But if we think about the geopolitical situation, then sometimes you get a little bit worried, right? Because regulation that we see in Europe and regulation that you see in the US is not the same, and it creates different opportunities, and it creates a different level of competition that we're not necessarily all that comfortable or familiar with. So I think that is definitely something to look out for. I am getting pushed because apparently the beers are on ice, and that is very important. However, I do want to give an opportunity for just maybe 2 or 3 questions just from the audience to see if we can get a view.
I have a question for the panel in regards to the transparency and proportionality requirements for privacy and explainability of AI. Are we putting proportionate budget and human resource in that space to make sure we combat financial economic crime in a responsible way?
I think one of the bankers
Three?
should reply this.
Mike?
Yeah, so I have to give a secondary response because what I'm seeing in my clients. So I think as we speak, it is becoming more and more important. Explainability, fairness, and as you know, the EU Act and various other regulations, they demand that banks and insurers or whoever else in the financial services is deploying AI does so responsibly. So I think if you ask me what is happening at this point in time, I think there is a gap in terms of the investment and the outlay, both in terms of resources and budget. But it's kind of, the gap is closing. So in the future, I guess we'll be in the right place because the wriggle room is reducing and you can't just not do it. Anything to add, Ibrahim?
You said it in a very good way.
I had a question for the whole panel. If you could name one key takeaway for everyone here, for every organization, on usage of AI in risk and compliance, what would it be?
So I would, from the onboarding perspective, give you some insight in our fraud cases we have. And in the same way you feel under pressure to come up with AI, the fraudsters are struggling as well. So 90% of our fraud cases are social engineering and not deepfake videos. And so this is not happening today. It will come at some point. But today, I guess you are facing jointly with us different problems than pure AI. And maybe you take some more time to do it properly, building your AI stuff. The other side is doing the same.
Can I ask the rest of the panelists? Marjoleine, what's your key takeaway of today?
Well, my key takeaway, I don't know if it's a key takeaway, but what I would like to say is that AI is not going to change the full world of KYC, which might be a very stupid thing to say here when we're talking about KYC or AI here all day. Because when you're scaling AI on the current processes, you're scaling, well, not client-friendly and operational effective processes. So we really need to redesign the world of KYC. So we need to work towards what we are doing within KYC, risk-based approach. So looking at risk assessments, and that's what we're going to do. And therefore, we're going to use AI. So it is not AI which is mainly changing it. Of course, it's helping us and making it frictionless, making client experience better, reducing costs, or, well, you can argue about if really costs are being reduced by it, but we need to change the full process. Otherwise, it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Maybe the golden word is simplification. This will be really a very good takeaway. Besides simplification, is also standardization. Not just to open it as for every risk and compliance organization, everyone will invent and reinvent the wheel. Why not just to use the standardized way of working, and also how to be human plus AI against problems, rather than human against AI. AI is a partner rather than a replacer. This could be a takeaway.
Berit?
Yeah, I think one of my key observations is, again, we said that the 4 key regulations around deployment of AI are EU AI Act, Model Risk Management Requirements, DORA, GDPR. And a lot of the requirements you see are crisscrossing. They are interdependent. So again, I've seen some of our clients who are attacking this with overlaps, as in they're kind of doing the same thing twice, thrice, and at times in slightly different ways. So it's really important to take a very holistic view of the regulatory landscape and then come up with a strategy or a framework that doesn't duplicate controls and efforts.
I think that's very important from an efficiency perspective as well. I think for me, one of the things that I also take away from today is we always think, when are the machines going to take over? Is it man versus machine, or how are we actually going to cope with this in future? And I think even in hearing everything that we heard today, all the exciting things that we're doing with AI, the man is never out of that picture, right? And actually, linking to what you guys said earlier in terms of how we use our workforce better, how we change, how that job creation will change. I think it's really just about how we all work together and how we utilize this, how we teach, how we learn, and how we stay up to date with the revolution that's going on from an AI perspective. That was actually such a good question, and that was going to be kind of my closing argument. So you've stolen that, but in the positive light, that means we are so much closer to drinks. So the last thing before we get to drinks and before I hand back over to Elena is just if you can please help me thank the panelists for their insightful views today. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I have a proposition to